Hello, everyone, and welcome back to School of Speech, presented by Speech Therapy PD. School of Speech has been designed for all of us school-based SLPs to come together to learn boldly, think critically, and really shine the light on the incredible work we are doing every single day in the schools. I'm your host, Carolyn Dolby, and I am so glad you're here. Today's episode is one that I know many of you have been waiting for, especially my SLP peeps that are working with multilingual students and wondering how to assess thoughtfully, ethically, and most importantly, how about realistically, right? So today we are talking about multilingual evaluations and how to elevate your assessments using converging evidence so we aren't relying on just one test score to tell a story, maybe an incomplete story at that. So I have truly could not have picked a better guest for this conversation, and I am thrilled to welcome Emily Sweet to the podcast today. Emily is a bilingual speech language pathologist and a clinical associate professor at the Institute for Speech Language Pathology at Widener University. She earned her master's degree from Teachers College at Columbia University and has spent 15 years working in hospitals and school-based settings. And now she specializes in clinical education and culturally responsive care across settings. So Emily, welcome to School of Speech. I am so happy to have you here.
Hi, Carolyn. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Our guest today, Emily Sweet, is a salaried employee as well. She's salaried at Widener. Am I saying that right? Widener? Oh, good. I thought.
Widener, yeah.
Okay. And I also have the Stepping Stones group.
Yep.
And with neither of us have any non-financials to disclose today. All right. I wanted to start the conversation, that big question on why we can't rely on a standardized test alone. And I knew that was like a really big question. So I'm thinking okay, let's paint a word picture. Here we go. You come to work and you get to your desk and there is a folder of an initial referral for speech language testing. And it's a multilingual student. What do we do? Where do we start? How do we start?
Yeah, and that's a very familiar picture, more and more so. We get a new student, they need to be evaluated. I am going to start by getting to know this student through all the people that interact with them. So I'm going to start by talking with the teacher. And a lot of this is what we do, hopefully, with our monolingual students as well. We go talk to the teacher. What are you seeing in the classroom? Where's the breakdown? What's happening? We're going to talk to the parents because, and we'll get into this a lot more, but there's a lot that tells us that parental report is a really strong diagnostic indicator. So we're going to talk to the parents. We're going to go do some observations, watch this student, and really get a sense, not just for how they're communicating, but what their language differences look like. Are they communicating in their home language, in their school language? What does that look like? And, once we have that picture, we can start to plan what our evaluation is going to look like and what other measures we're going to need.
And I heard you use the word differences, because I know that I'm assuming we all are trying to figure out the difference between a language difference or a speech difference. It could be artic or language, versus what we're really trying to suss out is the disorder, right? So a lot of us are directed by our districts or by the state that we need to have formal testing done, and we have to have, and to us, formal testing is a standardized test. So how do we choose where to go with that?
Yeah, that's one of our big questions. And I have to get on my soapbox for just 1 second because we hear that word formal testing all the time, right? And I really want us to think about the fact that everything we do is formal. We're trained, we're SLPs, we're evaluating with all these measures we take. Mm-hmm. And so when we think about like formal versus informal, we're sort of setting up these standardized tests as these are the best, and informal, everything else is just informal. And really what we're finding is that's not the case. All the testing we do is formal. Some of it is standardized, some of it is not. So that's my little soapbox there.
No, I think that's really important because I tend to use the distinction between formal testing and informal testing.
Mhm.
And it was kind of an aha for me right now to think, wait a minute, I'm undermining everything that I do if I'm making something a, gold star standard versus right. Because I think if when I hear informal, I it doesn't have that clinical lens to my way of thinking, like, or
Yeah.
a family or even teachers might think, oh, you're not doing, it's not clinical.
Yeah.
And I loved what you said, that everything we do is formal. And I think just like I had another episode where we were talking about the importance of using our full credentials and
Mm.
stating that we are speech language pathologists, we are scientific, we are clinical. And I think this is really dovetails that nicely, that all of our assessment, all of our data points are formal and clinical. I think that's important. So, but that kind of makes me, so now I'm thinking about standardized testing. What are some maybe some misrepresentations or misunderstandings when we're looking at our students that come from a multilingual background when we're using a standardized test or standardized scores?
Yeah. So I think we have to be really careful about using standardized tests and relying on those numbers until we really get a good look at the manual and see is the student we're testing represented the
Mm.
standardized test. With very few exceptions, a lot of the tests we give don't include our students in the normed population. The self Spanish is one that we use a lot. It's one of our
Mhm.
few available Spanish tests for our older kids. Very, very little bilingual representation there. Almost all the students were monolingual that was normed on. Yeah.
What? What? No. Wait. Okay, I'm sorry. It's like, I'm sorry. It's been a long day. So, did I just hear you say that the South Spanish is normed on monolingual and not
Primarily
okay.
normed on monolingual students. And
Okay.
so right there, right, we're already taking down the accuracy, the reliability of this thing that is theoretically the gold standard, and really it's not.
Sorry, I had to take a drink on that. Y'all, it's water. It's water. But
Sure.
okay, no, because now I'm saying, okay, whoa, this is big. So it isn't a gold standard of having a standardized test when we're looking at our population that we are using the test on. So what? Okay, we're not throwing away standard. This is not an
Right.
episode saying, all right, SLPs, throw out all your standardized tests. We're not saying that, right? Please, no, because I
Right.
know that there's got to be some use, some situations where they are helpful. How can maybe my question as I stumble over my words, because I'm a little gobsmacked, like what you just told me about that, and I should have known that, but sometimes I forget, is what can standardized tests do for us? And maybe
Yeah.
if we understand what the use is, we can explain that to families and teachers and our districts and the state that are requiring us to use a standardized measure. Maybe you're going to enlighten us on maybe some other standardized measures. I don't know. I don't know. It's a brand new day for me. Let's go.
We got lots of options. We got
Okay. All
lots
right.
to choose from. But yeah, so I'm going to borrow a phrase from my wonderful colleague Lauren Hayden, who said to me when we talked about this, the standardized test shouldn't be the rule, it should be the tool. So, yeah, I know. We use it as a tool, not as a rule. We really can't, for most of our students, we can't give this test, get the score, and say, yes, you qualify or no, you don't qualify, right? Because either the norming sample doesn't match, or the sensitivity and specificity of the test isn't appropriate. The confidence interval is too large to tell us anything. Like there's so many concerns. But, we can still give the formulated sentences subtest in English and Spanish and compare that data and say, after looking at this, they were able to, what sort of sentences were they able to formulate? Where did they break down? What kind of, can they use one clause but not two clauses? So we can still get, and we can even report raw data, on the following directions, they were correct in 19 out of 32 administered. So we can still get numbers. We can still get valuable data, even if we determine that it's not going to be appropriate to score the test.
Okay, so I like that we're going to use it as a tool, not the rule for our decision making. It's a tool towards our decision making. Okay, all right. So then if standardized tests don't tell the whole story, and what's a better framework for us to use for making decisions? Is that a big ask too? Yeah, big ask today.
Big ask, but it's a big topic.
It's huge, and I think a lot of us really do struggle. Because we want to do it right, and we want to do right by all our kids. And the last thing we want to do is over-identify. And just as importantly, we don't want to under-identify.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And both of those are big problems with, especially if we rely on standardized testing, and both of those do a big disservice to our students. So we can think about a converging evidence framework. And I am giving so much thanks and credit to the author Castilla-Earls, Annie Castilla-Earls, and colleagues who wrote this beautiful tutorial back in 2020 that you all can access on the journal, the AJSLP, really explaining the converging evidence framework and the fact that we need to take, it's not standardized tests are up here and then we do other stuff and we kind of think about it. We have our standardized tests, we have our parent and teacher input, we have our connected speech and language, and we have our evidence of learning, dynamic assessment, response to intervention, and all of those can come together. And we really can take all those as equal partners in helping us make diagnostic decisions. Yeah.
Did you see what sorry, Jennifer, you are right. It takes a lot more time to analyze the data from the subtest than it is just to score it. And I think again, and I hear that. And I think that's why we need to fight for the fact that if we are doing evaluations, that no, we can't just do a quick evaluation in an hour.
Yeah.
Evaluations take time, and we need to advocate for the time to do a robust evaluation on our contracted time in order to have that time to analyze the data. That's why we are pathologists. That's our training. We are to analyze. Yeah. And we need to just, and I think, sorry, I'm getting on a soapbox because I want to advocate for that. We need to be paid for our time and our expertise. Yeah. We're not speech teachers. We're pathologists, and we are being asked to give a clinical decision that can change the trajectory of a student's education career.
Yeah, we're diagnosing a disability. It's a big deal.
Right. And, I think I think it's just because we're just so darn nice. We are. Like SLPs, we are just a lovely bunch of people. Men and women, we are just delightful. And we need to say, when we get 14 initials to say, that's, we're talking, that's hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I guess I want to say, I understand, ladies and gentlemen listening, that it is true. It is taking a lot of time, but the student is worth it.
Absolutely. And how many times, if we do start with a standardized test, we do the standardized test, we score it, we use our confidence intervals because it's
Mhm.
so important to use our
Yes.
confidence intervals, and we get a number that's like, you know, 78 to 95.
Hmm.
And
What do we do
and
with that?
it's inconclusive, right? What does that
Mhm.
tell me? It tells me that there's a 95% chance that they're either within the norm or a standard deviation below the norm. And that's not enough to make a conclusive decision. And if I qualify that kid and they don't need it, again, it hurts them and
Yes.
it hurts me. They're on my caseload, they're on my colleagues' caseload. Like it's worth putting in that time to make those diagnostic decisions that really put the kids in the right place where they need to be.
So before we go further, I think there may be some listeners, including myself, that might be new to the approach, and maybe we could dive a little deeper into what converging evidence is. Do you mind maybe like really going through those pieces and how robust it should be?
Yeah.
Give us an idea of what we're working with.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the the image that they use in the paper that I'll paint a mental picture for you right now, we can picture we have four little boxes, right? And one of our boxes is standardized testing, which we're already talking about a little bit. And then we have some of those other things that we're going to do in our testing. So one of them is going to be parent and teacher input or parent and teacher measures of concern.
Mhm.
That's going to include things like a really robust parent interview and a teacher interview where, for example, in the parent interview, we might use something like the critical questions from the Leaders Project website. We might use, there's some questionnaires out there that give us specific questions, but we're really looking to find out from the parents what's the language history and the developmental history for this child, all the different ways that they're communicating, who they're communicating with, how they're showing their strengths and their abilities. We want to get parent information about obviously family history, just like we would with our monolingual children. So we're really getting a deep understanding of what the parent is seeing of this child's communication. And then we're relying on the teacher to give us a good, that gives us our sort of conversational language. And then with the teacher, we're looking to get a really good view of what's their academic communication like? How is their syntax? How is their academic vocabulary? How quickly are they picking up new words that you introduce to the class? So, getting that sort of specific input, if we're talking about a language evaluation, would be kind of our second box of our four boxes of our converging evidence.
I
We
just put
can,
in, sorry, when you said the Leaders Project, I took just a quick second and I just went and got the link for that and I just popped that in the chat. Sorry for interrupting. Um,
no,
so
thank you.
so if my eye went a little to the side, it was because I thought, oh, let me grab that really fast because I think that would be a great reference for our listeners.
Mhm.
So you're going to be giving us four boxes, and I just want to make sure, is the first box parent
The
or is
first
first box
box
is standardized?
is they are in no
Oh,
particular order, and that's very much on purpose because
okay,
we are
okay.
approaching this in the order that makes sense for us and our student, right?
Hmm.
So, yeah, one box is going to be our parent and teacher concerns and
Hmm.
input.
I love the way you said measures of concern. Sometimes just the way we say it
Mhm.
adds an impact. And it sounds, because if you just said parent interview, that doesn't hold as much weight than when you say measures of concern. I think it really does. Semantics matters when I know that we often want, I know we often want to speak in easy to understand language, but I think sometimes, like, especially for an initial evaluation, setting the stage for what this really is, using really solid terms of what this actually is. It's not just an interview. It is a measure of your concern. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm
No,
just
I love
jumping
that.
into yeah.
And I think that comes back to our theme of like, give ourselves credit, right? Don't sell
Yes.
ourselves short.
Yeah, we're not
Um,
just, it's, you know what? We're not just doing a quick little test to get them into speech, ladies and gentlemen. And I think when teachers or admin to say, oh, let's just do a quick speech evaluation, and we say, speech evaluations aren't quick.
yeah.
Do you think if you went to an evaluation, excuse me, if you went to your either your diagnostician, if you're in Texas, where I came from, or your psychologist,
Mhm.
LSSP, that you say, hey, can you do a quick achievement, intelligence, or, IQ and achievement
Right.
test? Could you just do that right quick? And they're going to say, no, no. Okay, sorry. Again,
No,
lots of
right
work to
there
do.
with you. Yeah. So we've got those parent and teacher input and concerns. We've got the standardized tests. We're not throwing the whole box of tests out the window.
Right, right.
Um,
Because we're going to use them as a tool,
right.
not a rule.
Bingo. So those are two of our boxes. And then we've got our language sample or our connected speech and language production, right? If we're looking at our tick, we're doing our speech
Mhm.
sample or our language sample. And we're getting, especially if we have a multilingual student, we're really trying our best to get a robust language sample in both of their languages
Right.
so that we can analyze their macrostructure, their microstructure, and their strengths and their needs. We might find that's a place that we really often reveal, oh, hey, their English one, they're struggling, but look at how they did in their native language.
Mhm.
And again, that's a difference, not a disorder. So that takes us back in that direction.
Absolutely. I think you just hit on it that it has to be in both languages. I know we know that. I know all of us know that, but the how heavy it is when you can really when you have that robust first language
Yeah.
sample because
Yeah,
differences does not a disorder make.
absolutely. And I there's a comment in the chat right now that I think is such a great question about the interviewing.
Hmm.
Would you suggest we speak to our multilingual students' parents annually to see if concerns change? Absolutely. We have our annual IEP meetings if we're in the schools, if we have them on an IEP. And, it's easy to sort of say, like, oh, do you have any concerns? No. Okay, great. But to
Mhm.
really do that, again, robust parent interview each year when we do those IEP meetings or whenever it makes sense for your schedule
Mhm.
to keep seeing not just if their concerns are changing, but like what kind of growth they're seeing, hopefully, what kind of changes they're seeing at home and improvements.
Taking a strength-based approach to it also. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Sandy, for adding that, for asking that. So, yay. Yeah, so again, I think you're really bringing this together to because really what we are trying to distinguish, plain and simple, well, it's not plain and simple, is the difference, language difference versus a disorder. Absolutely. And so we've got when we're looking at our four boxes, and I do like the fact that you reiterated that it's not a we go this first, this,
Right.
but you just you work it in the way it works. Parent teacher measures of concern. I think it's also really important, having that parent interview, absolutely. But how often do we do a teacher interview versus a teacher questionnaire? Right. And I
Right.
know, and how having teachers articulate exactly rather because sometimes I remember handing out a teacher questionnaire and they would say rarely all the way down,
Hmm.
right? And then you're like,
Hmm.
okay, teacher has, concerns. But then
Right.
really understanding where is the concern? I
Yeah.
think, you know, which is going to lead me. Well, I know we've got three, and you're going to give me the fourth, but it just led me to another question. So I'm just going to swallow that question for a minute. So we have parent teacher measures of concern. Your very robust connected speech and language samples in all languages that they speak and here too. And then your standardized testing tool.
Yep.
I'm liking that now. All right. And then what's our last one?
So then we're left with their potential for learning.
That's what yep,
Or
potential.
I believe the word they use in the paper is observation of learning, both of
Evidence
which,
of learning, I think you said too. Evidence of
thank
learning.
you. These are all
Yeah.
great words.
I
Yeah.
know. Let's throw out all the words that we could start using. Evidence of learning. I like that.
Yeah.
You said it. I'm not taking credit. You said it. Evidence to learn or of learning. I like it. All right. All right. So then this is great in theory, Miss Emily, right? Like all of this is wonderful, but let's what we're all here. We're tired. We're tired.
Yep.
SLPs, we are tired.
Yep.
We have limited time. We have full caseloads. So actually we want to do assessments right. We want to do it the right way. We don't want to waste time. We don't want to do anything, what do we need to do? Need to do all these four things. How do we make it work in the real world?
Yeah. That's absolutely it. And we're over here advocating for change, but if it's not happening yet and we still have our 1 or 2 hours that we have to fit our assessment into,
Mhm.
how are we going to make it work? Yeah. So there are some ways that we can streamline our processes a little bit, right? We can, especially with our language sample, and we talk about evidence of learning, we're really talking about dynamic assessment. RTI, if we have time, right? An RTI program might run a couple weeks more than that. So maybe we're doing dynamic assessment right then and there during our testing. And these are things that feel hard to achieve. They feel like, what is this? How do I do it? What does it look like? So let's break it down a little bit and
Yeah. Yeah,
figure
yeah,
out
yeah.
how to make it doable. So when we're looking at our language sample, I'm again going to refer to the Leaders Project, which that website's in the chat,
Mhm.
as one fantastic resource. There are certainly others out there. The Leaders Project has a free resource called the Slam cards, which are
Yes.
really fantastic. Yep,
I
you know
love
them.
those. Yep,
Yep.
I love them. I'm gonna go get
Really
that reference.
fantastic for language sample elicitation. They get the narrative sample. They have questions for you to ask so you can start to see, theory of mind and inferencing and all these other higher level things. You even elicit a personal narrative at the end. So you get both regular narrative retell and a personal narrative.
Oh, I'm done.
So you can get, excuse me, you can get a lot of good stuff with the slam cards. They are appropriate for use with students from a wide range of languages and ethnic backgrounds. So props to the slam cards. There are other ways out there that we can get our narrative sample depending on our kids' age, right? We can use wordless picture books. The frog books are a really popular one, even videos to get those retells.
Hey, I'm just, my thought is, I'm just thinking, I love the book Chalk. I think it's a wordless book called Chalk. All y'all that are out there in listening land, if you have a good wordless book or another idea for eliciting a language sample, pop it in the chat for us. We're a whole hive here. So if you have any ideas, we'd love to, go ahead, pop it in there. Yeah, yeah. Oh, excuse me. I think we have a question. Sam, let me see. You said, could you clarify if a student is successful in dynamic assessment, if that means they're a good candidate for therapy or okay. What we're clarifying is, does dynamic assessment, does that mean they're a good candidate for therapy, or does it indicate that there's no disordered learning and they don't need therapy? Sam, thank you for asking that. That is a perfect answer.
Amazing question. Yeah. So, short, simple answer, and then
Mhm.
we'll dig
Yeah.
into it, right? If they're wildly successful in dynamic assessment across the board of what you do with them, then we're usually going to conclude, again, we have our four factors,
Mhm.
nothing outweighs everything else. But if the dynamic assessment is super successful, that's going to indicate that that they likely don't have a speech and
Mhm.
language disorder. Because what we're looking for is them demonstrating that they have the ability to learn with a reasonably small amount of teaching, right? So my dynamic assessment isn't going to be a 6-hour lesson on 3 vocabulary words, because that's not a reasonable amount of teaching,
Yeah.
right? My dynamic assessment is going to be a 20-minute lesson on, 8 vocabulary words. And if with, for example, that amount of instruction and repetition and practice, if they're showing really good gains in those words, then they're demonstrating a great ability to learn. And that kind of points us to, well, maybe they just haven't had the opportunity yet. Maybe they need more teaching and more instruction rather than there's a disorder here. They need they need therapy.
Hi, Jackie. Thanks for being with us. She indicated a book called Journey. Danielle, Field Trip to the Moon. Oh, Catherine doubles down on that one. Ashley, thank you. The Carl books. Oh, Emily, Rory's Story Cubes. Yes, thank you for that. So thanks for those. Keep popping those in because we want to learn from each other. Put anything in that you can share with us. We love it because we are a village.
I will give my shout out when I was working with the little ones. Goodnight Gorilla. Anyone love Goodnight Gorilla out there? That was one of my favorite wordless picture books for the younger kids.
I love it. Oh yes, we're getting yes, yay,
Oh,
I
getting lots of
love
love for Goodnight Gorilla. Awesome.
it. So thank you for really telling us the reason behind the dynamic assessment really is to see their ability to learn. Because language is the foundation of learning. And if they just need a little extra explicit teaching,
Mm-hmm.
we're not, that's, they're general ed first, do they need special ed supports? So we want to make sure that they're getting the robust instruction in their current setting. Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, Catherine just said she used Goodnight Gorilla today. So, whoa, I love it. So shout out to that. All right. So we're really trying to balance everything that we need to do with being realistic. Right? Excuse me. So is there something that we could some wording we could use as SLPs when we get pressured to say just give the test, move things along? No. What can we say to that?
Yeah, well, so if we're in one of those situations where they say we need a number, right? Just give them the
Right.
test and give us a number. I think partly we can come back to the law. The IDEA does not require us to use standardized scores. We need to use appropriate measures.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I think if we shift our concept of what's formal and what's not formal, and, everything everything that we mindfully sit down and do to get information can be a formal measure, and we can get data from it. So yeah, I think sometimes the answer is just no, the law doesn't say I have to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And this test, sometimes I will just have to say, there's no test that's appropriate for this student. I can't. The standardization rules of the test say I can't score it. It's not
Mm-hmm.
me, it's the test maker. They say I can't score it because it's
Yeah.
not appropriate. So, we really need to keep advocating for that because it
Mm-hmm.
does, it seems simple from someone looking in from the outside and saying, just give the test. But
Right.
it's, unfortunately, the test doesn't work, and I can't get the information we need. So we have to do more.
And you're right, Janice. Janice just said, are there states that require we report scores? Not exactly report scores, I don't think. I think we do, we've been given guidance. No, I'm going to say this another way. Some states have translated the law, not that the word isn't translate. When you take the law and you describe it in a way, I'm a loss of words right now.
Interpreted the
Oh
law.
my God, that's what I interpret. Thank you, everybody. Oh my gosh, I don't have a language disorder, but right then it did appear like I did. You know what I mean?
We all have word
That's what I'm
finding
saying.
sometimes. It's all
Okay,
good.
everybody interpret. So states will sometimes interpret what the federal law from ID8 states, and then they'll come and say, it is saying that you need to use a standardized score. No,
Mhm. Yeah,
no. Yeah. Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. And some districts, will have
mhm.
their own specific criteria for qualifying. And even though that's not, again, supported by IDEA, they'll say, well, you have to have a score of 75 in order to qualify. And that sort of boxes us into feeling like we need these scores. But we have
Right.
to
And I
keep,
think when we're looking at a native monolingual American English speaker that the test has been normed on, we
Mhm.
can use that as a reliable diagnostic measure. But we can, I don't, we can't use, how can we standardize a score when it's not standardized on the student? I think is what we can say. But we can use the test as a tool to glean some information from, that helps us make that informed decision, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what it really comes down to is if this standardized test isn't an appropriate test for this student, the standard scores don't mean anything.
Wait, say that one more time.
Yeah, if the test isn't appropriate for this student
Mhm.
because they're not in the standardization sample, then the standard scores don't mean anything. We're comparing apples to oranges. They could take the test and get a standard score of 65, but the standard score means compared to your peer group and your language group and your age group. And if that's not present, then that's
So
not a meaningful standard score.
exactly. And so we've got like Cassidy and Catherine, thank you for jumping in saying like, okay, we're shaking some foundation here when we're saying we're being like Cassidy is saying that they're being told they need to check a box that they are two standard deviations below the mean in order to qualify. But I think what we say that when we use a standardized test that we actually write in our report that this test is not standardized on the profile of the student. There's, something along that line that
Yeah.
this test is not normed to a student with this cultural linguistic background. Therefore, the score should be viewed with caution. And this information is used, yeah, like we're not using the score, but we're utilizing the information for strengths and weaknesses. So we're using it to glean strengths and weaknesses, but the actual score would have to be viewed with caution because it's not normal on the student, I think is what we could say to keep
Yeah.
us like we could still use it, but we're using it with caution or how we're using it. Yeah. Or using it to kind of drive where we want to look like, oh, we're seeing some weaknesses. So now we're going to do some dynamic assessment and really look if we're saying that the student looks like we're having some issues with semantic or whatever, whatever
Yeah.
section we're looking at and just doing a deeper dive into that to then prove or to support your decision either way. So I guess the
Yeah.
dynamic assessment actually does support either way if you think about it that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So the dynamic assessment is really gonna, you know, usually we put that later in our testing because we need to know what we're doing a dynamic assessment for, right?
Yes, yes.
Am I looking at semantics or
Mhm.
morphology
Yes.
or, even speech articulation
Hmm.
stimulability is a dynamic assessment that most of
Hmm.
us probably do all the time. We check for stimulability. So once we kind of know what we're looking at, we can narrow that down with our dynamic assessment and get some measures of how responsive is this child to instruction. How quickly do they learn this information? How much examiner effort is the term that we use, right? How much is
Yes.
the teacher going to have
Yes.
to do to help them get this information in their heads?
Katie had a good point about do you report a score? You don't report the standardized score, but you can report, like you said, the raw score, like how many right did they get in this area? Like you said, in, formulating sentences, 19 out of 32.
Mhm.
And then back it up with some additional dynamic assessment that is going to you're going to say, but I don't, am I correct in that we can't, we can't do the standardized score because it's not standardized on that student, but we can use raw scores.
Yeah. And I
Yeah,
think that, if your student, you got to check the manual, right? Every
right.
test is
That's
different.
true.
Every
Yeah.
student has their background. If your student falls within that standardization sample, if you check out that manual and you're like, no, we're good, I'm comfortable with this,
Hmm.
then I'm saying, here's the score, still use it with caution, right?
Yes.
But if the student is not at all represented on the test, it's like I'm giving a test, it's almost the same as testing outside the age range, right? If I give the PLS to a 7th grade student,
Mm.
I'm not reporting that score. I'm getting
No.
really valuable information maybe, but
Yes,
I'm not
especially
reporting that score.
but if they needed that you needed to use the PLS to see where they were actually functioning, and
Yep.
you're using that as criteria reference. Oh, where did I get that? I don't know where I said that. But yeah, sorry about that, y'all. But you're right. It's giving us information of where they're functioning. Absolutely. Sam's question about like for our African American students, assuming would we expect dialectical differences? It doesn't feel right to make that assumption. Absolutely. You would then, I'm jumping on this one is that when you are interviewing the parent, you are doing you're literally doing a language sample on that parent. Right? Especially if you're doing an Arctic, and like in my family, I'm from Australia, and instead of saying thing, we say think. We do a K. I don't normally do it, but if I've been around my mom too long, my older sister does it way more than I do. Something instead of
Mhm.
something, right? And you're hearing that from mom that or dad, that's part of your eval, that this is how they're saying it. And that is a dialectical difference than a disorder.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a good point about it comes back to your parent interview.
Hmm.
And one of those questions we can ask in the parent interview is, if the child has siblings, how do they compare to their siblings? Do you notice differences between them and other children in the neighborhood? How do they compare to their cousins? So, really getting that picture of, are they communicating in a way that's appropriate for their community?
Hmm.
Or or
Oh.
if the parents are concerned, then that's kind of a red flag of like, it's not dialect. There might be something more going on.
Mhm. Exactly. I like Julie's question about in the pre-referral process, do you think it would be beneficial to screen in English and then have parents and or interpreter ask the same questions and try to see if there's difficulties in both language? Yes, I think I just answered that one. Because absolutely 100%. You know, the same can go for if they do speak two languages. Okay, let's just throw this out there. And you're giving it in English and they're like awesome. I mean maybe not
Yep.
awesome, but they're not like bombing it. That's your data right there. You don't need to go back and do a second like your first language because you're like, wait, if this is their academic language, their education language, and they are not showing a disorder, I don't think we would go any further, but that might be a weird one. I don't know why I came up with that one,
No,
but
I totally agree. Like then, like take yes for an answer, right?
oh,
If
you know what? Maybe that's what I'm trying to, thank you. Take yes for an answer. Like, why are we always trying? Just because we have the referral doesn't automatically mean it's that confirmation bias that we run into that, oh, somebody saw, there's a referral for this student, so therefore they must have a disorder.
Mm.
I think that's a little sticky wicket and something that we can fall into that we just, well, if there's concern, so therefore we need to really dig and find out where the real problem is because it's obviously a disorder.
It comes
Yeah.
back to those really robust parent and teacher interviews,
Mm-hmm.
right? What are you concerned about? Why are you concerned? What are you seeing? But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think if we have a student that ideally we're testing both languages to get a full picture. If we
Right.
do the English and they're knocking it out of the park on the English, then we can safely conclude that they don't have a disorder.
Right. And if they knocked it out of the park on their first language, it's not a disorder.
Exactly. Yeah. If we decide
Right.
to start in Spanish and they knock it out of the park, then there's not a disorder there either.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially if you are a bilingual, if you're lucky enough to be a bilingual with the same dialect as the student. I
Right.
mean, if
Right.
all the stars aligned, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, I know. So I guess I really want to talk also about how to really help our SLPs here, because thank you all for being here today, because I know we're all wanting to do better and we want to do right, not just better, we want to do right. And I get it. How can we really help our teachers, administrators, families really understand the difference between disorder and a difference so that we're advocating for appropriate evaluations and supports?
Yeah. That's a big question. You know, I think we in the field have been talking about this for a long time,
Yeah.
difference versus disorder and appropriate identifications.
Mhm.
And we have, so much knowledge about language development and language difference that we can share and pass on to our teachers and our teams. Even just the concept of if they don't have a disorder in their native language, I cannot diagnose them with a speech and language disorder is sometimes surprising information to our
Mhm.
teams. They'll say, but they can't speak English. They're not doing it in school. But sharing that information of just here's how bilingual language development works.
Mhm.
Sometimes sharing timelines. It takes a really long time to develop mastery of a new language. And sometimes we feel like, well, they've been here a couple of years, they're really good in conversation, but they're still struggling in school. There must be something wrong.
Right.
And maybe there is,
Hmm.
but we know that cognitive and academic language proficiency can take like 5 to 7 years to master.
Hmm.
And we should absolutely be helping and supporting these kids, but diagnosing them with a disorder might not be what they need.
Right. They need right, general ed supports for a multilingual learner.
Yeah, absolutely.
They
So
need
just,
those
yeah,
levels of support, multi-tiered level of support for the student that is exposed to more than one language. And Jennifer, I want to redeem myself about, would you ever have a kiddo that would have show a disorder? Wait, Wait, have you ever worked with a kiddo who showed a disorder in their first language but not in English? I think the only reason, the thought I was thinking on that was if like their first language was maybe Spanish, but they've been speaking English for ever. You know what I mean? Like if English was just as dominant. And it comes down to like different about dominance and that Bix and Calps,
yeah,
how long, right? And
yeah.
Anastasia has a question for you. I'm going to stop talking. Could you please repeat how long it takes okay. How long, right? You did give how long does it take to develop cognitive and academic language proficiency, the
Yeah,
CALPS?
the number we usually see is 5 to 7 years for cognitive and academic language proficiency. We usually look at about 2 years for the what we call BICS, the basic
Mhm.
interpersonal communication skills, and 5 to 7 for cognitive and academic. Think about all the vocabulary that gets thrown at you from kindergarten through fifth grade, and then you get dropped in that as a new language learner, and you have to start absorbing all that. So, yeah,
Right. And looking at just vocabulary as their language proficiency is not going to be doing them justice
yeah,
versus really getting the evidence of their learning. Are they able,
absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
And I want to just very briefly come back to the question of like, have we seen a kid who has a disorder in their first language but not in English? And I think, Carolyn, you addressed that a little bit. Something we sometimes see, especially as kids get older and they spend more and more time in school, is language attrition. So they might start to lose that home language a little bit.
Mhm.
because they're getting all their schooling and probably a lot of their social interaction in English. And they're coming home and they're having conversations with mom or dad, but maybe not getting all that other language input that they're getting in school. So we sometimes start to see that mismatch go in the other direction.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, we're kind of getting towards the end of our time and we've just opened up some other boxes. I get it about like what is our job, right?
Yeah.
And I think Janice, when you're asking how do you determine if it's a language disorder versus just not enough time with exposure to language and concepts, that's
Mhm.
exactly this conversation. Janice, thank you. You're bringing us right back to why we're here. And that is that we need to show that they have had enough exposure, that they have had the academic experience to be expected. And that's why we're looking at all languages that they speak and looking at it as a holistically. And so you would in my way of thinking that like let's say because a multilingual speaker might have the word for interpretation in their first language, but they couldn't come to it in the second language. That's not
Mhm.
a disorder. They still have that they still part of their vocabulary. So you wouldn't look at like, oh, they have 50, like let's say it's a little guy, 50 vocabulary words
Right.
in English,
Mhm.
and they have 100 different vocabulary. Well, they really do have 150 vocabulary words. Doesn't matter what language they're speaking. You know, it's not one or the other. It's like their whole language repertoire is what we're looking at, not if it's just in one language. I guess that's, you know, because that might be on me. And when I said it has to be in one, and has to be in both. I don't know. I can't even say that because if it's not in, oh, help me out. I need to stop.
No,
I'm tripping over my own tongue.
it's beautiful. And I love the vocabulary example, right? So we're looking for that like additive bilingualism, right? That environment where both languages are coming together to make the whole. And that's where it's so important for us to look at both languages as whenever possible. And Janice, I think you answered your own question here. You say that's the point of dynamic assessment. That's one of our big tools in our toolkit, right? Is it a language disorder or have they just not had enough time to learn? Well, let's spend a little extra time teaching them and see what their capacity for learning is. And
Mhm.
then we can deduce that that will apply to their future learning.
And I think what is the uncomfortable space that I'm in right now is that if we say, you know, we are seeing some strengths and weaknesses, but what is overpowering right now is that the student has not had enough exposure in both either language to right to determine if it is a disorder and to say that although that we are not going to make the determination that it's a disorder now, we can relook. It's something we could look at later,
Sure,
right?
absolutely. And that's another place where standardized tests fall short because if I'm
Mhm.
doing a formulated sentences and I have a kiddo who is mixing a lot of English and Spanish together because that's the point of development that they're at, well, according to the standardized test, I can't give them credit for that, right? It has to be
Mhm.
one or the other. So then I can use my language sample and say, look at these beautiful sentences in both languages mixed together, and really still show evidence that they have this robust language system.
Yeah. And Sandy jumped in about, you know, some of her multilingual students say that they're really speaking English, but their parents speak Spanish and they're speaking English now. But we really want to honor home language and really honor bilingual and multilingualism. It really is a benefit. It's really just in this Western culture that we think English is the language. Like I know it's our language of industry. Globally, it's the language of industry, but I think there's enough research out there in literature that really support multilingualism. Okay, I just needed to put my little 2 cents in on that one too. I'm a little, yeah. Yes. All right. I am wondering if, as we're getting close to the end, I want to make sure that we hit every topic we wanted to hit. Is there anything we didn't get to? Oh, Sandy, okay, Sandy came back on and said that when she's in IEP meetings, she encourages students to always respect their native language. Amen.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Yep.
yes, yes,
100%. I
yes.
put that in the recommendations at the end of all my evaluations. The parents are encouraged to communicate at home in the most comfortable language for them so that, the parents don't think they need to try to switch to English to teach their kids. We tell our students that the fact that they know two languages is like a superpower. They have this
Yeah.
thing that not everyone has. So
And
yeah.
to really honor that and being culturally responsive and culturally sensitive is big. And Lauren, thank you. Lauren was really vulnerable in saying that she used to think that mixing languages was a red flag, but actually it's code switching, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Thank
and
you,
so
Lauren.
we can also think about this term like interlanguaging or translanguaging, where
Hmm.
we're building bridges. If we're now, we do want our students to be like holding the rules of the language that they're using, so they're
Hmm.
not making these errors. But if they're mixing languages, that's okay. That's
Hmm.
typical.
I love it. All right. So I mean, this has been such an important conversation. I feel like you've really hit a lot of things. I just kind of want to bring us together if you want to redefine converging evidence,
Yeah,
let's do that.
absolutely.
So we can
So
end on a high here.
love it. I think we're told a lot to use our clinical judgment, right?
Yes.
And converging evidence is the way that we can quantify our clinical judgment and put it all together. So when we're using converging evidence, we're considering parent and teacher input measures, standardized testing, connected speech and language, and evidence of learning. We're giving them all equal weight. No one measure is more powerful than the others. And we're looking at those together and what trends and what direction they show us to come to our ultimate diagnosis of language impaired or not language impaired.
And I think it gives us words and just language to use when we're supporting why we're doing what we're doing and how we're doing it for sure. Um,
Absolutely. And the name of that is Beyond Scores, which I think just that
oh,
title is so beautiful.
I love it. Right, beyond scores. I love that. Okay, I want to make sure that we got everybody. I want to just thank you personally for coming on and sharing your expertise and everything. It's just been really practical. And I love that because it wasn't just, oh, in the perfect world, we're going to do that. You're like, no, this is what we have to use and this is what we need to use. And you've given us the power to say, this is how I came to that determination. I love it. I want to thank everybody that came to listen. I hope you are leaving with more confidence going back tomorrow or the next day when you're doing a multilingual assessment, that you're really using your clinical judgment through your converging evidence. I mean, I think if we
You
start
got it.
using these terms, it use the terms that it is.
Mhm.
I want to thank everyone listening, everyone being here, being present. If you love this episode, check out more fun, nerdy conversations when I'm involved on School of Speech. I really can't wait to hang out with everybody again on the next episode of School of Speech. All right, bye guys. Keep awesome.